The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot across the dusty town square of Clifton, Arizona, freezing Catherine Rose's heart mid-beat as her father's calloused hand tightened around her arm. It was 1878, and at 20 years old, Catherine Katie, to those who once called her friend, had never imagined she'd be standing on a wooden platform with a price on her head, her father's gambling debts having finally caught up to them both. $500. A man with tobacco-stained teeth called, his eyes crawling over Katie like she was horseflesh. Her father, James Rose, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed as he nodded to the auctioneer, a lanky man with a waxed mustache who seemed to take genuine pleasure in the proceedings. The crowd gathered in Clifton Square that sweltering June morning was a mix of miners, businessmen, and drifters, all men who'd heard through the saloon grapevine about the pretty young woman being sold off to settle her father's debts. "Do I hear 600? The auctioneer called, his voice carrying across the square. Katie tried to pull away from her father, but his grip only tightened, fingers digging into her flesh. "Stand still," he hissed. "You've been nothing but a burden since your mama died. Time you earned your keep." A tear slipped down her cheek, but Katie refused to give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. She'd spent the past decade caring for her father after her mother's death from consumption, cooking his meals, mending his clothes, tending the small farm they'd once owned before he gambled it away. And now this, the final betrayal. 700. Called a fat man in a silk vest, sweat beading on his brow despite the early hour. The crowd murmured. It was a high price for a woman, even one as pretty as Katie with her copper hair and green eyes. But everyone knew what the buyer would be getting: a domestic servant who'd have no choice but to comply with whatever demands were made of her. Katie felt sick. She'd heard the stories of girls sold to the brothels or to men who worked them to death. Her father had made it clear that whoever paid his debts would own her, plain and simple. The law wouldn't protect her. Not here in the Arizona territory, where justice often came from the barrel of a gun rather than a courtroom. 800. A calm voice called from the back of the crowd. The men parted, turning to look at the newcomer. Katie strained to see past the sea of dusty hats and leathered faces. A tall figure moved forward, the crowd giving way. The sun caught on the silver spurs of his boots first, then illuminated the rest of him, a man unlike the others gathered there. He was dressed like a cowboy, but there was something different about him. His clothes, though trail-worn, were of good quality. The black Stetson that shaded his eyes was pushed back now, revealing a face that was neither cruel nor desperate, just determined. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd faced worse situations than this and survived. "Owen Grant," someone in the crowd muttered. "Didn't expect to see him back in these parts." The auctioneer's eyes widened slightly. 800 from Mr. Grant. "Do I hear 9? The fat man in the silk vest frowned. 900. Owen Grant stepped closer to the platform, his blue eyes meeting Katie's for the first time. There was something in that gaze, not pity, but something else. Understanding, perhaps. He looked away, back to the auctioneer. $1,000, he said, his voice steady. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. It was an outrageous sum, more than most men in Clifton made in a year. 1,000 going once. The auctioneer called, looking around expectantly. The fat man shook his head. No one else spoke up. Going twice. Sold. To Mr. Owen Grant for $1,000. Katie's father finally released her arm, a greedy smile spreading across his face. Well, well, didn't know my girl was worth quite that much. Owen Grant approached the platform, removing a leather pouch from inside his vest. He counted out the money methodically while the auctioneer watched, then handed it over. Only when the transaction was complete did he look at Katie again. "Miss Rose," he said with a slight nod. "If you'll come with me." Her legs felt like water as she stepped down from the platform. The crowd was already dispersing, the entertainment over. Her father didn't even say goodbye, just pocketed his money and headed toward the nearest saloon. Owen Grant offered his arm, but didn't touch her otherwise. "My wagon's this way," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Katie hesitated. "What? What do you expect of me, Mr. Grant?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Nothing at all, Miss Rose. I bought your freedom, not you." She stared at him, uncomprehending. "My freedom?" "Yes. Once we're clear of town, you can go wherever you please. I'll give you enough money to get to Phoenix or even San Francisco if you'd rather." Katie's mind reeled. "Why would you do that? Spend all that money just to—" "Let's get moving," he interrupted, glancing around the square. "We can talk once we're on the road." Still stunned, Katie followed him to a wagon parked at the edge of town. It was a sturdy prairie schooner, well-maintained, with 2 strong horses in the traces. Owen helped her up to the seat without touching more than her hand, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from Clifton, Katie kept waiting to wake up from this strange dream. The man beside her was a stranger, a handsome one, to be sure, with his sun-bronzed skin and the slight cleft in his chin, but a stranger nonetheless. And strangers, in her experience, were never kind without reason. "Why?" she asked again when the town was just a smudge on the horizon behind them. Owen kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "No man should own another person. It's as simple as that." But Katie knew nothing was ever simple in the Arizona territory. "You spent $1,000 on principal." A faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe I have money to spare." "Nobody has that kind of money to spare," she countered. "Not around here." He glanced at her then, something like respect in his eyes. "Smart. That'll serve you well," he sighed. "Truth is, Miss Rose, I've seen what happens to women in your situation. My own sister was—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Let's just say I couldn't stand by and watch it happen again." "Your sister," Katie prompted gently. "Sold to pay our father's debts when I was just 16. I wasn't there to stop it." His knuckles whitened on the reins. "By the time I tracked her down 3 years later, she was already gone. Consumption, they said, but it was really a broken spirit." Katie felt a wave of compassion for this stranger. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, sharply. "So now you understand. I couldn't save her, but I could save you." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching over the dry earth, the desert landscape stretching out around them. Katie's mind was spinning with possibilities. Freedom. She had never really been free before, first a daughter, then a caretaker now. "Where will you go?" Owen asked eventually. Katie realized she had no answer. "I don't know. I have an aunt in Santa Fe, but we haven't spoken in years. I'm not sure she'd welcome me." "What can you do? Any skills besides farming?" "I can cook, clean, so I taught myself to read and cipher." She hesitated. "I've always wanted to be a teacher, but—" "But what?" "Women need references for such positions. Respectability. Who would hire me now after—" She gestured vaguely behind them toward Clifton. Owen considered this. "No one in Clifton knows what happened to you after today. You could start fresh somewhere else." Hope flickered in Katie's chest for the first time that day. Perhaps. They stopped when the sun was high to rest the horses. Owen handed Katie a canteen and some jerky from his provisions, then stepped away to give her privacy while she ate. He was a curious man, she thought, gentle in his way, but with a hardness around his eyes that spoke of difficult years. "How long have you been a cowboy, Mr. Grant?" she asked when he returned. "Most of my life," he replied, settling on a rock a respectful distance from her. "Started working cattle drives when I was 14. Saved up enough to buy my own small spread about 5 years back over near the Mogollon Rim." "You're a rancher then?" Not just a cowboy, he smiled slightly. Trying to be. It's a modest place, but it's mine. Katie nodded. A man with a ranch would have some money saved, but $1,000 was still an enormous sum. And you just happened to be in Clifton today. His expression darkened. No, I heard about the auction through a friend who works at the telegraph office. Rode all night to get there in time. You came specifically to. Katie couldn't finish the sentence. To stop it, yes. He met her gaze steadily. Didn't know how I'd manage it, but I could not try. Katie studied him, trying to make sense of this man who had upended her life so completely in the space of an hour. Thank you, she said finally, the words inadequate but all she had to offer. He nodded, then stood and brushed off his trousers. We should get moving if we want to reach the next town by nightfall. As they continued their journey, Katie found herself relaxing marginally in Owen's presence. He didn't pry into her past or make her feel indebted. Instead, he pointed out landmarks as they traveled and told her stories of his years on cattle drives, tales of stampedes narrowly avoided, and nights spent beneath star-filled skies. By late afternoon, they reached a small settlement called Pine Creek. It was little more than a general store, a livery, and a simple boarding house, but Owen guided the wagon directly to the latter. You can stay here tonight, he said as he helped her down. It's run by a widow named Mrs. Abernathy, decent woman who doesn't ask questions. I'll pay for your room and a hot meal. Katie felt a sudden panic at the thought of being left alone. And you? I'll be at the livery with the horses, he said, misunderstanding her concern. Don't worry, no one here will trouble you. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I don't know what happens tomorrow. Owen's expression softened. That's up to you, Miss Rose. As I said, I can give you money for a stagecoach to wherever you want to go. Or if you need more time to think, we could travel a bit farther together. I'm in no particular rush to get home. The idea of parting ways so soon left Katie feeling oddly bereft. This man was the first person in years who had shown her true kindness, and the thought of facing the world alone again was daunting. But she also knew she couldn't rely on his charity forever. I'll think about it overnight, she decided. Owen nodded and carried her small bundle of belongings, the only things her father had allowed her to bring into the boarding house. Mrs. Abernathy was indeed a kind-faced older woman who asked no questions beyond whether Katie preferred chicken or beef with her supper. After arranging for the room, Owen excused himself to see to the horses. Katie was shown to a small but clean bedroom at the top of the stairs, where she immediately went to the wash basin and scrubbed her face and hands, trying to wash away the memory of standing on that auction platform. Later, as she sat in the boarding house's small dining room eating the best meal she'd had in months, she watched Owen through the window as he conversed with the livery owner. There was an easiness to him, a natural dignity that had nothing to do with wealth or position. He was simply a man comfortable in his own skin. Katie realized with a start that she was staring and quickly looked down at her plate. It was foolish to develop any sort of attachment to Owen Grant. He had done her an enormous kindness, yes, but his obligation to her ended there. She needed to figure out her own path forward. Yet when he entered the boarding house a short while later and took a seat across from her, she couldn't help the small flutter in her chest. Mrs. Abernathy says there's a stagecoach passing through tomorrow afternoon, he informed her. Goes all the way to Prescott, where you could then connect to Phoenix or head north if you prefer. Thank you, Katie said, pushing the remains of her stew around her plate. That's good to know. Owen studied her for a moment. Something troubling you, Miss Rose? Katie, she corrected automatically. Please call me Katie. After what you've done, it seems silly to stand on formality. He inclined his head. Katie then, and I'm Owen. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what to do next, and I'm afraid I don't have many options. I have no references, very little education despite my efforts to learn, and no connections in any of the larger towns. What would you do if you could do anything? Owen asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. I told you I'd like to be a teacher someday, but that requires schooling I can't afford. What else? She thought for a moment. I'd like to have my own home, a place that belongs to me that no one can take away, and I'd like to plant a garden with flowers as well as vegetables. My mother loved flowers, she smiled sadly. Simple dreams, I suppose. Not simple at all, Owen said quietly. Those are the things that matter most. Their eyes met across the table, and Katie felt a connection she couldn't explain, as if this man somehow understood her in a way no one else ever had. The moment was broken when Mrs. Abernathy appeared to clear their plates and offer apple pie. As they ate the sweet dessert, Owen explained more about his ranch. It's about 3 days' journey from here, he said. Good land with a creek running through it. I've built a proper house, not just a cabin, and started breeding horses alongside the cattle. It sounds lovely, Katie said sincerely. It's lonely, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. Don't get me wrong, I have a couple of hands who help with the stock and neighbors within riding distance. But at the end of the day, it's just me in that house. He looked down at his empty plate. That's partly why I was in no hurry to return directly. Empty houses have a way of echoing. Katie understood that feeling all too well. After her mother died, their small farmhouse had felt cavernous despite its size. As the evening drew to a close, Owen walked Katie to the foot of the stairs. Get some rest, he said. You've had a difficult day. Whatever you decide about tomorrow, I'll support it. Thank you, Owen, for everything. He tipped his hat slightly and turned to go, but Katie impulsively caught his arm. Would you? Would you consider another option? His eyebrows rose questioningly. I could work for you, she suggested, the idea forming as she spoke. Not as I mean as an actual employee. I could cook and keep house, and in return you could provide room and board and perhaps a small wage until I save enough to pursue teaching. Owen frowned slightly. I didn't rescue you from being bought just to make you work for me, Katie. It wouldn't be the same thing at all, she insisted. I'd be earning my own way with fair compensation and the freedom to leave whenever I choose, and you'd get hot meals and a clean house. From what you've said, it sounds like you could use the help. He still looked uncertain. People would talk. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch. I'd stay in a separate building, a bunkhouse perhaps, and your ranch hands could vouch for your character. She smiled tentatively. Unless you have a reputation I should know about. That earned a short laugh. No, nothing like that. I'm considered boringly respectable in those parts. Then, Katie pressed, holding her breath. She knew it was an unusual proposal, but something told her she could trust this man. And the alternative, striking out alone for an unknown city with limited funds and no plan, was far more daunting. Owen ran a hand through his hair, considering. And that's a big if we did this, there would have to be clear boundaries. You'd have your own quarters with a lock on the door. You'd be paid a fair wage weekly, not just room and board. And if at any time you felt uncomfortable or wanted to leave, I'd personally escort you to the nearest town and make sure you had sufficient funds to start over. Hope bloomed in Katie's chest. Those terms sound more than fair. Sleep on it, Owen advised. This has been a day of extremes for you. Make sure it's what you really want before you decide. Katie nodded, though in her heart she already knew. Something about Owen Grant made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a recognition of his fundamental decency, rare as gold dust in this harsh territory. Good night, Owen, she said softly. Good night, Katie. I'll see you at breakfast. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Katie felt the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. She had woken this morning as her father's property and would go to sleep tonight as a free woman with choices ahead of her. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. In her room, she sat by the window looking out at the stars, contemplating the strange twist of fate that had brought Owen Grant to Clifton at exactly the right moment. Was it mere coincidence, or something more? Her mother had always believed that there were no accidents in life, only paths we were meant to follow. As sleep finally claimed her, Katie wondered what path she was on now, and where it might lead. Morning came with golden sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of Katie's room. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting to wake in her narrow bed in the farmhouse outside Clifton. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up quickly. She dressed in her only other dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her Sunday best, and pinned her hair as neatly as she could without a proper mirror. If she was going to present herself as a potential employee to Owen, she wanted to look capable and respectable. When she came downstairs, Owen was already seated at a table by the window, nursing a cup of coffee. He rose when he saw her, and Katie was struck again by his natural courtesy. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected to," she admitted, taking the chair he pulled out for her. "And I've made my decision if your offer still stands." Owen signaled to Mrs. Abernathy for another coffee before responding. "I meant what I said about sleeping on it. This isn't a decision to make hastily." "I'm not hasty by nature, Mr. Grant," Katie said firmly. "I've thought it through. Working for you offers me security while I build my savings, and it sounds like you genuinely need the help. It's a fair arrangement for both of us." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but I want to be clear about something, Miss Rose. I'm offering you a job, not making you an indentured servant. You'll have Sundays off and time to yourself each day. I'll expect good meals and a tidy house, but not perfection." "That sounds more than fair," Katie agreed, relief washing through her. "When would we leave?" "After breakfast, if you're ready. We'll need to purchase some supplies before we go, and I'd like to buy you some proper traveling clothes if you'll allow it." "The trail to my ranch crosses some rough country." Katie flushed. "You've already spent so much. Consider it an advance on your wages," Owen said pragmatically. "Can't have my housekeeper arriving half frozen or sunburnt now, can I?" Put that way, Katie could accept his offer without feeling like a charity case. "Thank you. That's very sensible." After a hearty breakfast of eggs and flapjacks, Owen escorted Katie to Pine Creek's small general store. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted Owen by name. "Back again, Grant. Thought you'd be halfway to your ranch by now." "Change of plans, Simmons," Owen replied easily. "Miss Rose here needs some traveling gear. We're heading up to my place where she'll be taking over as housekeeper." Simmons's eyebrows rose as he looked Katie over, but he made no comment beyond. "Certainly, certainly. The ladies' things are in the back corner, miss. Help yourself." With Owen's encouragement, Katie selected a sturdy split riding skirt, 2 cotton blouses, a warm jacket for cool mountain nights, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her face from the sun. She balked at the price, but Owen insisted that quality items were an investment. "Better to spend more now than have to replace cheap goods in a month," he pointed out. While Katie was examining a pair of leather gloves, she overheard Simmons speaking to Owen in a low voice. "Housekeeper, eh? Where'd you find her? Don't recall seeing her around these parts before." "She's from Clifton originally," Owen replied, his tone giving nothing away. "Needed a fresh start." "Well, she's a pretty thing, Better be careful or your housekeeper might end up with a more permanent position if you take my meaning. Katie tensed, waiting for Owen's response. Miss Rose is under my protection and my employ, Simmons. I'd appreciate it if you'd remember that. The coolness in Owen's voice effectively ended that line of conversation, and Katie felt a rush of gratitude for his defense of her character. After paying for their purchases and adding some basic supplies to their wagon, they set out from Pine Creek shortly before noon. Katie, now dressed in her new riding skirt and blouse, found the journey much more comfortable than the previous day's travel. As the wagon rolled steadily northward, the landscape began to change. The desert scrub gave way to grasslands, and by late afternoon, they could see the dark line of pine forests in the distance, marking the beginning of the higher elevations. "We'll make camp tonight near Beaver Creek," Owen told her. "There's a good spot I know with fresh water and shelter." "Camp," Katie repeated, suddenly realizing what traveling for 3 days actually meant. "You mean sleep outdoors?" Owen glanced at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "It's the only way to get there. The stagecoach route doesn't go anywhere near my ranch." "Of course," Katie said quickly, not wanting to seem like a helpless city girl. "I just hadn't thought about the sleeping arrangements." "You'll have your privacy," Owen assured her. "I have a small tent you can use. I'll sleep by the fire." True to his word, when they reached the campsite as the sun was beginning to set, Owen efficiently set up a small canvas tent for Katie. He showed her how to secure the flaps and where to place her bedroll inside, then left her to arrange her things while he tended to the horses and started a fire. The practicalities of camp life proved more challenging than Katie had anticipated. When nature called, she had to venture into the bushes, constantly looking over her shoulder. Washing her face and hands in the creek left her fingers numb with cold. And the thought of sleeping alone in a tent, with only canvas between her and whatever wildlife roamed these parts, was more than a little unnerving. Yet there was something exhilarating about it, two sitting beside a crackling fire under a vast canopy of stars, eating a simple but satisfying meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits that Owen prepared with practiced ease. "You cook," Katie observed as she accepted a tin plate from him. "Had to learn," he replied with a shrug. "Can't always have someone else do it for you on the trail." "Well, once we reach your ranch, you won't have to anymore," she promised. "Cooking is one of the few things I do well." Owen smiled, the firelight catching the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "I look forward to it. My hands complain constantly about my cooking, though they're too polite to say it to my face." "How many men work for you?" Katie asked, realizing she knew very little about the place that would soon be her home. "Just 2 regular hands brothers named Tom and Michael Fletcher. Good men, reliable. During roundup or branding, I hire on extra help." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "The ranch isn't large by some standards, about 2,000 acres with 300 head of cattle and a small horse breeding operation I'm trying to build up." "It sounds impressive to me," Katie said honestly. Owen looked thoughtful. "It's a start. My father always said a man needs 3 things to be content: land to call his own, work that matters, and someone to share it with." He cleared his throat. "I've managed 2 out of 3 so far." The personal admission hung in the air between them, intimate in the firelight. Katie wasn't sure how to respond, so she changed the subject slightly. "Tell me about your horses. What kind do you breed?" Owen's face lit up, and Katie knew she'd hit upon a passion. For the next hour, he told her about his breeding program, how he was crossing sturdy Mustangs with larger Eastern stock to create horses with both stamina and strength, ideal for ranch work in the rough Arizona territory. "You should see my stallion, Thunder," he said with evident pride. black as midnight with a white star on his forehead. Smart, too. Sometimes I think he understands every word I say. I've always been a bit afraid of horses, Katie admitted. My father had an old plow horse that nipped me when I was small, and I never quite got over it. That's a shame. There's nothing like the freedom of a good gallop across open country. Owen studied her for a moment. I could teach you to ride properly if you'd like. Start you on Daisy. She's a gentle mare who's never had a mean bone in her body. The offer was casually made, but Katie sensed it represented something more, a commitment to her being at the ranch long enough to learn such a skill. I'd like that, she said softly. As the fire burned down to embers, Owen showed Katie how to bank it safely for the night, then walked her to her tent. If you need anything, I'll be right there, he said, pointing to where he'd laid out his bedroll near the fire. Don't hesitate to call out no matter the time. Thank you, Katie said, suddenly shy. Good night, Owen. Good night, Katie. Sleep well. Inside her tent, Katie wrapped herself in the thick blankets Owen had provided and listened to the night sounds, the rustle of wind through pine needles, the occasional hoot of an owl, the soft nickering of the horses. It was both frightening and oddly peaceful. She thought about the man sleeping just yards away, a man who had spent a fortune to save a stranger, who treated her with unfailing respect, who spoke of his land with love and his future with quiet longing. Owen Grant was unlike any man she had ever known. And that, Katie realized as she drifted towards sleep, could be a dangerous thing indeed. The next 2 days of travel fell into a comfortable rhythm. They would rise with the sun, share a simple breakfast, and be on the road within the hour. Owen proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the region's history as they traveled. The terrain grew increasingly beautiful as they climbed into higher elevations. Pine forests gave way to meadows bursting with wildflowers. Streams tumbled over rocky beds, and distant mountains formed a jagged blue line on the horizon. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, Katie could tell they were nearing their destination. Owen sat straighter in the wagon seat, his eyes scanning the landscape with the pride of ownership. There, he said finally, pointing ahead to where the trail crested a small rise. Once we top that hill, you'll see the ranch. Katie's stomach fluttered with nerves as the horses pulled them up the incline. This would be her home for the foreseeable future, a place she had committed to sight unseen, with a man she had known for only 3 days. What if the ranch was nothing like Owen had described? What if his men resented her presence? What if her thoughts scattered as they reached the top of the rise and the valley below came into view? Spread beneath them was a scene so picturesque, it might have been painted, a wide, green valley bisected by a winding creek, with meadows giving way to stands of pine and aspen. Nestled in the center, near a bend in the creek, stood a sturdy 2-story house with a deep porch wrapping around 3 sides. Nearby were a large barn, several corrals, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse and other outbuildings, all well maintained. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark dots against the green, and horses moved in one of the closer corrals. Smoke rose lazily from the house's chimney, indicating someone was home. The G-Bar-G, Owen said quietly, using the ranch's brand name. What do you think? It's beautiful, Katie breathed and meant it. After the hardscrabble existence she'd known in Clifton, this verdant valley seemed like paradise. Owen smiled, genuine pleasure in his expression. Let's head down then. The boys will have seen the wagon by now. Sure enough, as they descended into the valley, Katie could make out 2 figures emerging from the barn, shading their eyes to look up at the approaching wagon. By the time Owen pulled the team to a halt in the yard, the men were waiting, a matched set of tall, lanky cowboys with sandy hair and identical curious expressions. "Tom, Michael," Owen greeted them as he set the brake. "This is Miss Catherine Rose. She'll be taking over as housekeeper starting today." The brothers exchanged a quick glance before removing their hats. "Madam," they said in near unison. Then the slightly older one added, "Welcome to G. I'm Tom Fletcher and this is my brother Mike." "Pleased to meet you both," Katie replied, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Owen jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Katie descend. As his hand circled her waist, lifting her easily to the ground, she was acutely aware of the Fletcher brothers watching with undisguised interest. "Tom, would you see to the team?" Owen asked. "I'll show Miss Rose to her quarters and get her settled." "Sure thing, boss," Tom replied, already moving toward the horses. "You're just in time for supper," Mike added. "I started a stew like you asked in your telegram, Mr. Grant. Should be ready in about an hour." Katie glanced at Owen, surprised. "You sent a telegram?" "From Pine Creek," he confirmed. "Thought it best to give some warning rather than just arrive with a new housekeeper." He led her toward the main house, carrying her bags. Up close, the structure was even more impressive, built of solid timber with large windows and that inviting porch. Inside, Katie found a home that was functional and well constructed, but clearly lacking a woman's touch. The large main room combined a sitting area with a stone fireplace and a dining space with a long table that could seat 8. Off this was a good-sized kitchen with a modern cookstove, a pantry, and plenty of workspace. Everything was clean but Spartan: no curtains on the windows, no cushions on the wooden chairs, no decorative touches whatsoever. "It's not much to look at," Owen admitted, seeming to see it through her eyes, "but the bones are good." "It's a lovely home," Katie assured him. "Just needs some softening. That would be welcome." He gestured toward a hallway. "There are 3 bedrooms on this floor: mine, a guest room, and what was meant to be a study, but has mostly been used for storage. Upstairs are 2 more rooms under the eaves." He led her to the guest room, a pleasant space with a large window overlooking the creek. Like the rest of the house, it was simply furnished: a bed, a chest of drawers, a small table with a pitcher and basin, and a wardrobe. "I thought you might prefer to sleep in the house rather than the bunkhouse," Owen explained. "It's more comfortable and more appropriate since you'll be working here. There's a lock on the door," he added, demonstrating the solid bolt. Katie set her bag on the bed, feeling overwhelmed. After years of sharing a drafty 2-room cabin with her father, this spacious, sturdy house seemed impossibly luxurious. "Thank you," she said, blinking back unexpected tears. "It's perfect." Owen cleared his throat. "I'll let you get settled. Take all the time you need. We usually eat around sundown, but there's no need for you to cook. Tonight Mike's got supper handled. Tomorrow's soon enough to start your duties." When he had gone, Katie sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to absorb the magnitude of the changes in her life. Just 4 days ago, she had been in Clifton, facing a future of servitude or worse. Now she was here, in this beautiful valley, with her own private room in a fine house, and a job with a decent man who treated her with respect. It seemed too good to be true. And in Katie's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She shook off the dark thought. Owen Grant had given her no reason to doubt his integrity. If anything, he had gone out of his way to ensure her comfort and security. She would repay his kindness by being the best housekeeper this ranch had ever seen. With renewed determination, Katie unpacked her few belongings, washed up, and changed into her cleanest dress before joining the men for supper. The meal was simple but hearty: a beef stew with vegetables from the ranch's kitchen garden, fresh baked bread, and canned peaches for dessert. The Fletcher brothers, initially shy, soon warmed up and proved to be engaging dinner companions with their stories of ranch life. "You should have seen the boss when that ornery steer got loose last month," Mike recounted, grinning at Owen. "Chased it through the creek and right into Mrs. Hollister's garden party in town." Owen groaned. "I thought we agreed never to mention that again." "Can't help it, boss." "Funniest thing, I ever saw you all muddy and apologizing to those ladies in their fancy dresses while trying to rope that steer off the punch table." Even Owen had to laugh at the memory, and Katie found herself joining in, charmed by the easy camaraderie between the three men. After supper, the Fletchers excused themselves to the bunkhouse, leaving Katie and Owen alone in the main room. A slightly awkward silence fell between them. "I should explain how things work around here," Owen said finally, gesturing for Katie to take a seat by the fire while he remained standing. "The boys and I are up before dawn to handle the stock. We take breakfast at first light, dinner that's the midday meal around noon when we come in from morning chores, and supper after the day's work is done." Katie nodded. "That's similar to the schedule I kept with my father on our farm." "Good." Owen seemed relieved. "As I said, you'll have Sundays off entirely. You're welcome to attend church in town with us if you wish. It's about an hour's ride. Otherwise, the day is your own." "Do you have preferences for meals?" Katie asked, wanting to understand her duties clearly. "Nothing fancy required. Hearty, filling food is all we need." He hesitated. "Though I wouldn't say no to pie now and then." Katie smiled. "I make an excellent apple pie." "As for the house," Owen continued, "keep it tidy, but don't feel you need to scrub every surface daily. Laundry's done once a week. The boys handle their own, but you'll be responsible for household linens and my things. There's a wash house out back with a good copper boiler." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch, which he handed to Katie. "Your first week's wages in advance." $7. Is that acceptable?" Katie's eyes widened. $7 a week was far more than she had expected, more than many schoolteachers made. "That's very generous." "It's fair," Owen corrected. "You'll be working hard, and if you need anything from town, just let me know. I make the trip about once a week for supplies." He showed her where everything was in the kitchen and pantry, explained how the pump worked, and pointed out the root cellar where preserved foods were stored. By the time they had finished the tour, evening had fully settled in. "You must be tired after our journey," Owen said. "Please don't feel you need to rise early tomorrow on your first day. Take time to get oriented." "I'll be up to make breakfast," Katie insisted. "It's why I'm here after all." Owen smiled, the warmth reaching his eyes. "Very well." "Good night then, Katie." "Good night, Owen." In her room, Katie sat by the window looking out at the moonlit valley, feeling a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The events of the past few days seemed like a dream. Yet here she was, in this peaceful place, with a future suddenly full of possibility. For the first time since her mother's death, Katie felt something like hope stirring in her heart. And if, as she finally drifted off to sleep, her thoughts turned more than once to the man whose kindness had made it all possible, well, that was only natural gratitude. Nothing more. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Katie settled into life at the G-Bar-G. She rose each morning before dawn to start breakfast, usually a hearty meal of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee that the men devoured before heading out to their chores. The rest of her day was filled with cleaning, baking, laundry, and tending the kitchen garden that had been somewhat neglected before her arrival. Owen had not exaggerated when he said the house needed a woman's touch. Katie gradually added small comforts, curtains sewn from fabric Owen brought back from town, wildflowers in jars on the tables, cushions for the chairs stuffed with spare wool from the shed. The house began to feel like a home, and Katie took pride in creating a welcoming space for Owen and his men to return to after their long days of work. The men, for their part, seemed to appreciate her efforts. Tom and Mike Fletcher were unfailingly polite, always removing their hats and boots before entering the house, and expressing frequent appreciation for her cooking. Owen was equally respectful, but maintained a certain reserve that Katie found both frustrating and intriguing. He was unfailingly kind, asking each day if she needed anything and making sure she didn't work too hard. Yet he rarely joined in the easy banter at mealtimes, and often disappeared after supper to work on the ranch books or take a solitary ride around the property. Katie couldn't help but wonder what thoughts occupied him during those quiet moments. True to his word, Owen began teaching Katie to ride. Her first lesson on the gentle mare named Daisy was terrifying. She clung to the saddle horn with white knuckles as Owen led the horse around the corral, but each day brought improvement. By the end of her third week at the ranch, Katie could mount and dismount unassisted and walk the horse confidently around the paddock. "You're a natural," Owen told her one evening as they finished a lesson. "Soon you'll be galloping across the valley." "I doubt that," Katie laughed, but secretly she was pleased by his praise. As she grew more comfortable with her surroundings, Katie began to explore beyond the immediate ranch buildings. One sunny afternoon, having finished her chores early, she followed the creek upstream to a small waterfall that tumbled over moss-covered rocks into a clear pool. The spot was shaded by aspens and felt secluded, though it was still within sight of the ranch house. Katie removed her shoes and stockings and dangled her feet in the cool water, relishing the moment of solitude. Her life had been so defined by duty for so long, first to her ailing mother, then to her demanding father, now to her position at the ranch, that she had almost forgotten how to simply be. So absorbed was she in her thoughts that she didn't hear approaching footsteps until a voice spoke behind her. "Found my thinking spot, I see." Katie startled, turning to find Owen standing a few yards away, hat in hand. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, moving to pull her feet from the water. "I didn't mean to intrude." "No, please," Owen said, gesturing for her to stay put. "I didn't mean to chase you away. It's a lovely spot, isn't it?" "Beautiful," Katie agreed, relaxing slightly. "Do you come here often, when I need to clear my head?" He hesitated, then asked, "May I join you?" At Katie's nod, Owen settled on the rock beside her, though he kept a respectful distance and didn't remove his boots. "I've been meaning to ask how you're settling in," he said, gazing out at the water. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" "Very much so," Katie assured him. "Everyone has been kind, the work is satisfying, in this place." She gestured to the valley around them. "It's like nowhere I've ever been." "I felt the same way when I first saw it," Owen admitted. "Knew immediately this was where I wanted to build my life." "How long have you had the ranch?" "Going on 5 years now. Bought it when it was little more than a run-down cabin and a few hundred acres of overgrazed land." Pride colored his voice. "Built it up bit by bit. This year's the first time we've turned a real profit." "You've accomplished a great deal," Katie said sincerely. Owen shrugged. "Still a lot to do. The house needs expanding if the operation keeps growing, and I'd like to add more land to the north where the grazing is good." "You have plans," Katie observed. "That's more than most people have." "What about you?" Owen asked, turning to study her. "What plans do you have?" Katie rose. The question caught her off guard. I haven't thought much beyond the immediate future." "But you mentioned wanting to teach someday." Katie was surprised he remembered. "Yes, I suppose that's still my dream, but it seems very distant." "I'd need proper education myself first." "There's a good school in Prescott," Owen said thoughtfully, "and books. I could get you books from town if there are subjects you want to study." The offer touched Katie deeply. You would do that, of course. Owen looked almost offended that she would doubt it. Education's important. My mother was a school teacher before she married my father. She always said learning was the one thing no one could ever take from you. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Sadness flickered across Owen's face. Lost both my parents to influenza when I was 18. That's when my sister and I were left on our own and, well, you know what happened after. Katie hesitated, then placed her hand gently on Owen's arm. I'm sorry about your sister. You must miss her very much. Owen stared at her hand for a moment before meeting her eyes. I do. Rachel was sunshine personified, always laughing, always seeing the best in people. Even at the end, when I finally found her, she didn't blame anyone for what happened to her. She sounds like she had your kindness, Katie said softly. No, Owen shook his head. She was better than me. I've carried anger for a long time. It's why he broke off, looking away. Why you what, he sighed. Why I keep mostly to myself. Easier that way. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the waterfall. Katie was acutely aware of her hand still resting on Owen's arm, but couldn't bring herself to withdraw it. You ever get lonely here? She asked finally. Owen considered the question seriously. Sometimes. Less since you came, he added, the admission clearly difficult for him. The house feels different now, warmer. I've tried to make it comfortable, Katie said. It's not just the curtains and cushions, Owen replied, his voice low. It's having someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who listens. The intensity in his blue eyes made Katie's heart beat faster. For a moment she thought he might say more, might even reach for her hand. Instead, he stood abruptly. We should head back. It'll be time for supper soon. Katie tried to hide her disappointment as she pulled on her stockings and shoes. Something had shifted between them during that conversation. A door had opened a crack, but Owen seemed determined to keep it firmly shut. As they walked back to the ranch house, Katie wondered if she was foolish to feel drawn to this man. He was her employer, after all, and she was still finding her footing in this new life. Yet there was something about Owen Grant that called to her, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the sadness he carried that matched her own. But until Owen was ready to open that door wider, Katie knew she would have to be patient. Some wounds took time to heal, and from the little he had shared about his past, Owen's ran deep indeed. Summer gave way to early autumn, bringing cooler nights and spectacular color to the aspen trees that dotted the valley. The pace of ranch work intensified as Owen and the Fletchers prepared for the fall roundup and cattle drive to the railhead in Flagstaff. We'll be gone for about a week, Owen informed Katie one evening in late September. Tom, Mike, and I, plus 3 hands from the Broken Arrow, spread to the south. We're combining our herds for the drive. A week, Katie repeated, trying to hide her unease at the thought of being alone at the ranch for so long. In the 2 months she'd been at the G-Bar G, she had never spent a night without Owen and the Fletchers nearby. Owen seemed to sense her concern. Will you be all right by yourself? I could ask Mrs. Hollister from town to stay with you if you'd prefer the company. No, Katie said quickly, not wanting to appear helpless. I'll be fine. There's plenty to keep me busy, and I have Daisy if I need to ride for help. Her riding skills had improved considerably over the summer, though she still hadn't attempted anything faster than a trot. I'll leave you my pistol, Owen decided. Do you know how to use one? Katie shook her head. Then I'll show you before we go. Not that you'll need it, he added hastily, but I'd feel better knowing you could protect yourself if necessary. The next afternoon, Owen took Katie to a clearing behind the barn and patiently taught her how to load, aim, and fire his Colt revolver. The first shot nearly knocked her off her feet with its recoil, but by the end of the lesson, She could hit the broad side of a tree trunk with reasonable accuracy. "Just remember," Owen instructed, "it's a tool, not a toy. Only use it if you absolutely have to." "I pray I never need to," Katie said sincerely, handling the weapon back to him with relief. "Amen to that," Owen agreed. The morning of the cattle drive's departure arrived cool and clear. Katie rose especially early to prepare a hearty breakfast for the men, including extra biscuits and jerky they could take on the trail. As the others loaded the last supplies into the chuck wagon, Owen lingered in the kitchen, giving Katie final instructions. "There's money in the safe if you need it. I've written down the combination. The nearest neighbors are the Hendersons, about 3 miles east. And remember, if there's any trouble, don't try to handle it yourself. Get on Daisy and ride for help." "I'll be careful," Katie promised. "Don't worry about me, just focus on getting those cattle to market safely." Owen nodded, but still seemed reluctant to leave. "I've never left the ranch in someone else's care before," he admitted. "I'll take good care of it," Katie assured him. "It's my home too now." The words slipped out before she could consider their implication. Something flickered in Owen's eyes, surprise and perhaps something warmer. "Yes," he said softly, "it is." A call from outside broke the moment. "Boss, we're loaded up and ready." Owen straightened. "I should go." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Almost forgot. Got this for you in town last week." Curious, Katie unwrapped the package to find a book, Basic Principles of Education and Teaching, by a professor from back east. "You mentioned wanting to learn more about teaching," Owen explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "Thought this might help." Katie was deeply touched by the thoughtful gift. "Thank you, Owen, this is perfect." "Well," he cleared his throat, "we'll be back in a week, weather permitting." On impulse, Katie stepped forward and kissed his cheek. "Be safe." Owen's eyes widened, his hand rising to touch the spot her lips had brushed. For a breathless moment, Katie thought he might pull her closer. Instead, he gave a small nod, placed his hat on his head, and strode out the door. From the porch, Katie watched the men depart, Owen and the Fletchers on horseback, flanking the small herd of cattle, with the chuck wagon bringing up the rear. Owen turned in his saddle just before they crested the hill, raising his hand in farewell. Katie waved back, then hugged herself against the morning chill as the procession disappeared from view. The ranch felt eerily quiet without the men's presence. Katie filled the first day with extra chores, scrubbing the kitchen floor, airing out bedding, organizing the pantry, anything to keep busy and not dwell on the emptiness of the house. As night fell, she found herself jumping at every creak and rustle. She double-checked the locks on the doors and windows and kept Owen's revolver on the table beside her bed, though the weight of it gave her little comfort. By the third day, Katie had adjusted somewhat to the solitude. She established a routine, caring for the chickens and kitchen garden in the morning, working on her studies in the afternoon, and reading by lamplight in the evening. The book Owen had given her was fascinating, full of modern educational theories and practical teaching advice. Katie took careful notes, imagining how she might apply these principles someday. On the fourth evening, a fierce storm blew in from the mountains. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rattled the house to its foundations. Katie built up the fire in the main room and tried to concentrate on her book, but the howling wind made it difficult to focus. Just as she was considering retiring early, a loud pounding on the front door made her heart leap into her throat. Katie froze, listening. The pounding came again, more urgent this time. "Hello, anyone there? Please, we need help." It was a woman's voice, thin with desperation. Katie hesitated only a moment before grabbing the revolver and approaching the door cautiously. "Who's there?" she called. "My name is Sarah Winters." My husband's been hurt. Our wagon overturned in the storm. Please, we need shelter." Katie took a deep breath, then unbolted the door, keeping the pistol partially concealed in the folds of her skirt. Outside stood a young woman soaked to the skin, her blonde hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with fear. Behind her, barely visible in the rain, a man leaned heavily against the porch post, clutching his side. "Please," the woman repeated. "He's bleeding." Katie's caution gave way to compassion. "Come in, quickly." With Katie's help, they managed to get the injured man to the sofa. He was perhaps 30, with a weathered face currently contorted in pain. Blood seeped through his fingers where he pressed them against his ribs. "What happened?" Katie asked, setting aside the gun to fetch clean towels. "Our wagon hit a rock in the dark," Sarah explained, helping her husband out of his sodden coat. "Wheel broke and we rolled. John was thrown against some rocks. We saw your lights and walked here." "You're lucky you found us," Katie said, handing Sarah a towel. "There's not much else out this way." John Winters groaned as his wife pressed the towel to his wound. "Don't think anything's broken," he managed through gritted teeth. "Just a bad gash." Katie boiled water and collected the medical supplies Owen kept in a cabinet in the kitchen. She had some experience with injuries from her years of farm work, and this one, while nasty, didn't appear life-threatening. After cleaning the wound, a 4-inch gash along the ribs that thankfully wasn't too deep, Katie applied a poultice of herbs her mother had taught her to use for preventing infection, then bound it tightly with clean bandages. "You have a healer's touch," Sarah commented, watching Katie work. "My mother taught me," Katie replied. "She was skilled with herbs and remedies." Once John was patched up and resting more comfortably, Katie made hot coffee and offered the couple dry clothes, some of her own for Sarah, and Owen's for John, which were too large but better than their wet garments. "We can't thank you enough, miss." Sarah trailed off, realizing they hadn't been properly introduced. Catherine Rose, but please call me Katie." "You live here alone?" John asked, glancing around the large house. "No," Katie said firmly. "The owner and his ranch hands are away on a cattle drive. They'll return in a few days." She felt it prudent not to mention that she was completely alone. "We don't mean to impose," Sarah assured her, "but John's in no condition to travel tonight." "Of course you must stay," Katie insisted. "There's a guest room upstairs you can use. Tomorrow, when the storm passes, we can see about your wagon." As she prepared the guest room, Katie wondered if she was being foolish to trust strangers so readily. But the couple's distress seemed genuine, and she couldn't in good conscience turn away injured people on such a terrible night. Still, she kept the revolver close as she retired to her own room and turned the key in the lock for the first time since arriving at the G-Bar G. Morning brought clear skies and confirmation that Katie's instincts had been sound. John was much improved after a night's rest, and Sarah proved to be pleasant company as they prepared breakfast together. "We're on our way to California," Sarah explained as she sliced bread. "John's brother has a farm near Sacramento. We sold everything back in Kansas to make the journey." "That's a brave undertaking," Katie commented. Sarah smiled ruefully. "Some might say foolish, but there's nothing left for us in Kansas since the drought took our farm." After breakfast, John felt strong enough to accompany Katie and Sarah to locate their wagon. They found it about a mile from the ranch, tilted on its side with one wheel completely shattered. Their mule had apparently broken free but hadn't wandered far and was grazing contentedly nearby. "It'll take at least a few days to repair," John said after examining the damage, "and that's if I can find the right materials." "Mr. Grant has a workshop with tools and lumber," Katie offered. "I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you used it to make repairs." They salvaged what they could from the wagon, loading the couple's possessions onto the mule's back. Back at the ranch, John set to work crafting a new wheel while Sarah insisted on helping Katie with household chores in exchange for their lodging. Over the next 2 days, a friendship blossomed between the women. Sarah, only a year older than Katie, shared stories of her childhood in Kansas and her dreams for California. Katie, in turn, found herself confiding details of her life she had never shared with anyone, her difficult years with her father, the auction that had changed everything, and her complicated feelings for Owen. "He sounds like a remarkable man," Sarah observed as they kneaded bread dough together. "To spend so much money saving a stranger." "He is remarkable," Katie agreed softly, "but I don't think he sees himself that way." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "And have you told him how you feel about him?" Katie blushed. "I don't. That is, I'm just grateful to him." Sarah smiled. "Gratitude doesn't usually make your eyes light up that way when you say a man's name." Katie had no response to that uncomfortable truth. By the 6th day, the wagon was repaired, and the Winters were preparing to continue their journey. John's side was healing well, and both he and Sarah seemed rejuvenated by their unexpected rest at the G-Bar-G. "We can never repay your kindness," Sarah said as they loaded the last of their belongings into the wagon. "You've more than earned your keep," Katie assured her. "Besides, helping others is what makes us human." "Still," John insisted, "if you or Mr. Grant ever find yourselves in Sacramento, you'll have a place to stay." As Katie waved goodbye to her new friends, she felt a curious mixture of emotions, glad to have been able to help, sad to see them go, but also relieved to have the ranch to herself again. The Winters' presence had been a welcome distraction from her solitude, but it had also emphasized how much she missed Owen and the familiar routine of life with him and the Fletchers. The cattle drive was due to return the next day, assuming all had gone as planned. Katie spent the evening preparing baking pies, preparing a stew that could simmer all day, making sure the house was spotless. She wanted everything to be perfect for Owen's return. As she climbed into bed that night, Katie finally admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. Her feelings for Owen Grant had grown far beyond gratitude or friendship. Somewhere along the way, between his rescue in Clifton and their quiet conversations by the creek, she had fallen in love with him. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Owen had never indicated he saw her as anything more than his housekeeper and perhaps a friend. And even if he did harbor deeper feelings, would he ever act on them? His reserve, his commitment to propriety, his lingering grief over his sister all suggested a man unlikely to risk his heart again. Yet Katie couldn't help but hope. There had been moments a look held too long, a casual touch that seemed to linger, the book he had chosen so thoughtfully that hinted at something more. Tomorrow, she decided as sleep claimed her. Tomorrow, when he returns, I'll find a way to let him know. Katie was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats the next afternoon. Her heart leapt as she wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to the front porch. Coming down the trail were Owen and the Fletchers, looking trail-worn but triumphant. Even from a distance, Katie could see the smile that broke across Owen's face when he spotted her waiting. "Welcome home," she called as they dismounted in the yard. "Good to be back," Owen replied, removing his hat as he approached the porch. "Everything all right here? No troubles?" "Nothing I couldn't handle," Katie assured him with a smile. "How was the drive?" "Successful," Owen confirmed. "Got a good price for the cattle, too." Tom Fletcher sniffed the air appreciatively. "Something sure smells good, Miss Rose. Hope there's plenty trail cooking ain't exactly satisfying." "Apple pie cooling on the windowsill," Katie confirmed, "and beef stew nearly ready." "Heaven," Mike declared fervently. Pure heaven. The men went to wash up while Katie put the finishing touches on the meal. When they gathered around the table, Katie was struck by how right it felt to have them all back how in just a few months. These people had become her family. After dinner, when the Fletchers had retired to the bunkhouse with extra slices of pie, Owen lingered at the table, clearly wanting to talk but unsure how to begin. I have something for you, he said finally, reaching into his vest pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed it on the table between them. Curious, Katie opened it and gasped softly. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a book. It opens, Owen explained, reaching over to demonstrate. The tiny book indeed had a clasp, and inside was just enough space for a miniature photograph or lock of hair. Owen, it's beautiful, Katie breathed. But I don't understand. I saw it in a shop window in Flagstaff and thought of you, he said simply. With your love of books and learning. Katie felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, I'll treasure it. Here, let me. Owen stood and moved behind her chair. Katie lifted her hair as he fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. When he returned to his seat, his expression was more serious. While I was away, I had a lot of time to think. About what? Katie asked, her pulse quickening. About the future. About this ranch and what I want for it. He took a deep breath. About you. Katie's heart seemed to stop. Me, you've brought something to this place that was missing before. Not just good meals and a clean house, but... He struggled for words. Life. Warmth. When I ride home at the end of a long day and see light in these windows, knowing you're inside, it gives me a peace I haven't felt in years. Owen, Katie whispered, hardly daring to hope. I know I have no right to ask, he continued. You're young, educated, with dreams of teaching someday, and I'm just a rancher with more cattle than conversation. But these past months, I've come to care for you, Katie, more than I thought possible. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not asking anything of you now, just wanted you to know where I stand. If you ever thought you could see a future here with me, I'd do everything in my power to make you happy. Katie's vision blurred with tears. Oh, Owen, I already am happy here with you. Hope dawned in his eyes. You are. Yes, she said simply. The day you found me in Clifton was the worst day of my life, but now I see it was also the best because it brought me to you. Owen's hand tightened around hers. I never told you why I was really in Clifton that day. You said your friend at the telegraph office told you about the auction. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Owen looked down at their joined hands. I was there because I'd finally tracked down the man who sold my sister your father, James Rose. Katie felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. What? I'd been searching for years, following rumors, asking questions in every town I passed through. When I heard about the auction in Clifton and that the man's name was Rose, I thought it might finally be him. I went there planning to confront him, maybe worse. Owen's voice was rough with old pain. But then I saw you standing there, looking so brave despite everything, and I knew I couldn't let history repeat itself. So you never came for me at all, Katie said slowly. You came for revenge against my father. At first, Owen admitted, but the moment I saw you, everything changed. I couldn't save Rachel, but I could save you, and then, as I got to know you. He squeezed her hand. Katie, meeting you has healed something in me I thought would be broken forever. Katie was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this revelation. Part of her was shocked by how close Owen had come to violence, how different their first meeting might have been. But another part understood all too well the pain and rage that had driven him. Hadn't she felt the same toward her father as she stood on that auction platform? Thank you for telling me the truth, she said finally. And thank you for choosing compassion over vengeance that day. I should have told you sooner, Owen said. "I was afraid you'd hate me for it." Katie shook her head. "How could I hate the man who gave me my freedom? The man who's shown me nothing but respect and kindness since the day we met." She stood, drawing him to his feet as well. "The man I've fallen in love with." Owen's eyes widened. "Katie." She stepped closer, her heart pounding. "I love you, Owen Grant, not because you rescued me, but because of who you are, a good man trying his best to build something worthy in this world." Owen's hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. "I love you too," Katie rose, "more than I have words to say." When he finally kissed her, it was gentle at first, then deepening as Katie responded with all the feeling she'd kept hidden for so long. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and she felt the solid strength of him, steady as the mountains surrounding their valley. "What happens now?" she asked when they finally drew apart, breathless. Owen smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now I court you properly, if you'll allow it, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I hope you'll consider becoming my wife." "I don't need courting to know my own heart," Katie said firmly. "But I would like time for others to see us together that way, so they understand this isn't merely an arrangement of convenience." "As long as you need," Owen promised. "We have all the time in the world." Winter came early that year, blanketing the valley in snow by mid-November. The G settled into a quieter rhythm, with fewer demands for outdoor work and more time spent in the warm house. Owen had spoken with Tom and Mike Fletcher the day after his conversation with Katie, explaining the change in their relationship. The brothers had exchanged knowing looks, Mike muttering about time under his breath, while Tom simply offered his congratulations. For propriety's sake, Katie continued to occupy the guest room, though now the door between her room and the hallway remained unlocked. She and Owen spent their evenings together by the fire, reading, talking, or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. True to his word, Owen courted her properly, bringing wildflowers until the snow made them scarce, then finding other small gifts to delight her. He took her on rides around the property when weather permitted, showing her his favorite places and sharing his dreams for the ranch's future. In town, they attended church together and were seen at social gatherings, making their intentions clear to the community. There were some raised eyebrows at first, a few whispers about the housekeeper who had risen above her station, but Owen's standing in the community and their obvious devotion to each other soon silenced most critics. Katie continued her studies, with Owen's enthusiastic support. He brought books from town whenever he went and spent hours discussing their contents with her. Their conversations ranged from educational theories to history, literature, and philosophy, revealing to Katie that beneath Owen's quiet exterior lay a curious mind and thoughtful intelligence. As Christmas approached, Owen disappeared into his workshop for hours at a time, refusing to let Katie see what he was making. The mystery was solved on Christmas Eve when, after a festive dinner with the Fletchers, Owen presented Katie with his gift, a beautiful writing desk he had crafted himself. "For your studies," he explained, watching anxiously as she ran her fingers over the polished surface and intricate carvings, "and for the letters you'll write when you become a teacher." Katie's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, Owen." "But I won't need to write letters, I'll be teaching right here." "What do you mean?" "I've been speaking with Reverend Collins in town," Katie explained. "He says at least a dozen families in the valley have children with no access to proper schooling. They're too scattered to justify building a schoolhouse, but if a teacher were willing to travel between homesteads." Owen's face lit up with understanding. "A circuit teacher, like a circuit preacher but for education." "Exactly. I could spend a day or two at each farm or ranch, teaching the children there, then move on to the next. Eventually, if more families settle here, perhaps we could establish a proper school. Katie, that's brilliant. Owen took her hands in his. When would you start? Reverend Collins thinks by next fall, if I continue my studies through spring and summer. She bit her lip nervously. What do you think? I think, Owen said slowly, that those children will be the luckiest in the territory to have you as their teacher. And I think I'm the luckiest man alive to have you in my life. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, also handmade, Katie noticed, with the same careful craftsmanship as the desk. I was going to wait until spring, Owen said, his voice suddenly husky with emotion. But I don't want to wait any longer. Catherine Rose, will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the firelight and scattered it in rainbow prisms. Yes, Katie whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, Owen. With all my heart. Their wedding took place on a perfect spring day in early April. The aspens were just beginning to leaf out, and wildflowers dotted the meadows surrounding the ranch house. Reverend Collins performed the ceremony on the front porch with the Fletcher brothers, the Hendersons from the neighboring ranch, and several other friends from town in attendance. Katie wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Owen had insisted on ordering from Denver, with her copper hair swept up and secured with her mother's pearl combs, the one treasure she had managed to keep through all her hardships. Owen, usually most comfortable in work clothes, looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a new black suit. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the meaning behind them went deeper than words could express. When Owen slipped the gold band onto Katie's finger, and the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, it felt to both of them like the completion of a journey neither had expected to make. The small reception that followed was joyful, with music provided by Tom Fletcher's fiddle and Mike's surprisingly melodious baritone. Even Owen was persuaded to dance, proving more graceful than his usual reserved manner might suggest. As the celebration continued into evening, Owen drew Katie away from the festivities, leading her to their spot by the creek. The waterfall gleamed silver in the twilight, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "Happy, Mrs. Grant?" Owen asked, his arm around her waist. "Impossibly so," Katie replied, leaning into his embrace. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "There's something I want to tell you, something I've been working on." "Another surprise. Owen, you've given me so much already." "This one's for both of us." His eyes were bright with excitement. "I've purchased the land to the north, the grazing land I told you about, but that's not all. There's a perfect spot there on a rise overlooking the whole valley. I've drawn up plans to build a new house there, Katie. A bigger one with a proper schoolroom where you could teach when the weather's too bad for traveling, and extra bedrooms for," he hesitated, a flush rising to his cheeks. "For children," Katie suggested softly. Owen nodded. "If you want them. A family of our own someday." Katie's heart swelled with love for this man who had transformed her life so completely. "I want that more than anything, Owen. A home, a family, a life with you." He kissed her then, under the stars beside the rushing water, a kiss full of promise and passion and the certainty of a shared future. "I never thought I could be this happy," Katie whispered against his lips. "Never thought I'd find a place where I truly belonged." "You belong with me," Owen said simply, "and I with you. From the moment I saw you in Clifton, I think some part of me knew that." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the lights of the ranch house, their home, their future, their own small piece of heaven in the Arizona wilderness. In the years that followed, the G prospered. The new house on the northern ridge was completed by the following spring, a spacious, handsome structure with large windows that caught the light and offered sweeping views of the valley. As Owen had promised, it included a bright room that served as Katie's classroom during inclement weather, though most days she still traveled her circuit, bringing education to the scattered children of the region. Katie's first pregnancy was confirmed just as they moved into the new house, and their son James Owen Grant was born that winter, a strong, healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's curious nature. A daughter, Rachel Sarah, followed 2 years later, and another son, William Thomas, 2 years after that. Owen expanded the ranch operations, adding sheep to the cattle and horses, and earning a reputation throughout the territory for his fair business practices and quality stock. The Fletcher brothers remained loyal hands, eventually building small houses of their own on ranch land when they married local sisters. Each summer, the Winters visited on their journey between California and Kansas, their friendship with Katie and Owen growing stronger over the years. And each Christmas, Owen added a new carving to the mantle, a tradition he started the first year of their marriage to mark the growth of their family and home. On the 10th anniversary of the day Owen had outbid everyone in Clifton, Katie found him at their special spot by the creek, sitting on the same rock where they had first truly talked. "I thought I might find you here," she said, settling beside him. At 30, Katie had matured into a woman of quiet confidence, her copper hair now streaked with a few strands of silver, her green eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. "Just thinking," Owen replied, taking her hand automatically. At 36, he was in his prime, still strong from daily work, with smile lines at the corners of his eyes, the only sign of passing years. About what? About how different things might have been. He looked at her intently. "If I hadn't gone to Clifton that day, if I hadn't seen you there, if I hadn't had the money to outbid those men." "But you did," Katie said softly. "You were there, you saw me, you had the means to help, and you chose to use them for good instead of vengeance." Owen nodded slowly. "I've never regretted that choice, not for a single moment. Nor have I regretted accepting your help or coming to work here or falling in love with you." Katie squeezed his hand. "Every step led us here, Owen, to this life we've built together." From the direction of the house came the sound of children's laughter, James and Rachel chasing each other across the yard, while baby William watched from his blanket on the grass. "We should get back," Katie said, standing and pulling Owen to his feet. "I promised the children we'd have a picnic supper." As they walked hand in hand toward their home and family, Katie reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From a desperate auction platform in Clifton to this peaceful valley, from strangers to devoted partners, from broken pasts to a future full of promise. "I love you, Owen Grant," she said, stopping to look up at him. "Today and always." "And I love you, Katie Grant," he replied, his voice still holding the same wonder it had the first time he'd said those words. "For saving me as surely as I saved you." Together, they continued toward the house where their children waited, their love a testament to the healing power of compassion, the strength found in second chances, and the unexpected ways freedom could transform a life.